What is the greatest WrestleMania of all time? That's what's going to be figured out today here on SCW. We, and I say we because together there is 38 wrestling YouTube channels partaking in this collaboration video, all going to give our opinion on what is the greatest WrestleMania ever. And you can join the conversation as well, leaving the comment in the comment section what you think is the greatest WrestleMania of all time. While you're at it as well, please like the video, share it with a friend as well, subscribe to SCW if you haven't already, and hit the beautiful bell as well. You can be notified each and every time a video is released. And while you're at it, why not support the very talented guys and girls in the wrestling YouTube community that are a part of this video? So many fantastic channels as well, with a great variety topics of videos as well. The links to every channel is in the description of this video, so go and support them. And before starting as well, I personally want to say a big thank you to everyone that actually has partaken in this video. Would not have been able to do it without you, and thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this. So without further ado, let's get straight in with the rules of how this video is going to work. So all 38 wrestling YouTubers have been drawn at random. I will introduce who drew numbers 1 and 2. They will share their opinion on which is the greatest WrestleMania of all time. This will then continue until all 38 wrestling YouTubers have given their opinion on what is the greatest WrestleMania event ever. If you wish to know my favourite WrestleMania event of all time, I too am drawn at random and can appear in this video at any time, so you must stay tuned. YouTube channels with more than one person are voting individually. So for example, 2 people from the same channel with the same answer equals to 2 votes towards the final score. Different answers give 1 vote each to the WrestleMania each channel member has chosen. The winner will be the WrestleMania event with the most votes at the end. And I will keep you up to date with the votes and standings at regular intervals throughout the video. So please do remember as well that each person's opinion is their own in this video. Do not get upset if you do not agree with any of those opinions, especially if WrestleMania 11 is the one that walks away with a victory at the end. And one other small note as well, we're going to go through the journey through every WrestleMania as we introduce every single participant as well, so lots of things to go back through memory lane. Copyright credit goes to WWE for the photo work in this. There are so many WrestleMania moments that we will go back and revisit throughout this video. But without further ado, it's time now to find out who drew entry number 1, and I'm pleased to have him on the channel for the very first time. Been a big fan of his channel for a long time, whether it's his watch-alongs, his opinions on anything pro wrestling. It is none other than Greg Morgan. That's right, GoodMicWork Commentaries is entrant number 1 for the greatest WrestleMania ever here on SCW.
Hey, what's going on? This is Greg Morgan from GoodMicWork Commentaries. Very happy to be a part of this YouTube collaboration with SCW Wrestling. And Steve would like to know, what do I consider to be the greatest WrestleMania event of all time, out of all of them? Now, this one for me is a little bit easy. It depends on how you judge this. There's lots of different ways you can look at it. You can go by gate, you can go by pay-per-view buys, you can go by a lot of different factors. But for me, if I'm looking at this personally, there's really only one answer. It was a show that I was at, WrestleMania 3 in Pontiac, Michigan, 1987, 93,000 people in the Silverdome. That estimated attendance is padded a bit, but I was there and it looked full as hell to me. And I don't know if you noticed, but I am a fangirl and a mark for WrestleMania 3. I have 7 copies of it on VHS right here. That's how much I think this show changed wrestling. WWE was already off to the races and past the NWA and the AWA and the other territories, but this show really made them a global phenomenon. You had to have lived through it to understand the magnitude of it. And Andre and Hogan, even though they were not strangers to each other, that main event was built as a mega match that the world has always wanted to see. You know, even though it happened many times years earlier, they were able to put this together and actually sell the majority of the audience on the fact that Andre the Giant was undefeated for 15 years, which was bullcrap. I think that show is really overall looked at as the godfather of WrestleManias. You know, the panning crowd shots and that epic confrontation stare down with Hogan and Andre, the great undercard, and a fantastic Intercontinental title match that many consider the greatest WrestleMania match of all time between Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat also took place on that show, and I was proud to be a part of it, even though I was only 10 years old. So for me, WrestleMania 3.
Big thank you there to GoodMicWork Commentaries there. Fantastic choice, Greg, there. Obviously, WrestleMania 3 with the body slam heard around the world with Hogan and Andre, and one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time with Ricky Steamboat going against the Macho Man Randy Savage. But will WrestleMania 3 be the greatest WrestleMania of all time at the end of this video? We are one down with 37 wrestling YouTube channels to go. So without further ado, it's time to find out who drew entry number 2. A regular on the channel has got his great takes on everything topical in the world of pro wrestling, has his own podcast as well. It is none other than Mex, WrestleManiac UK, drawing number 2 here on SCW.
What's up, people? My name's Mex. I'm a wrestling fan, a wrestling enthusiast, a WrestleManiac, if you will. And I got asked by Steve, what is the greatest WrestleMania of all time? And I know a lot of people's immediate answer is going to be WrestleMania 17. We saw a lot of good stuff at that WrestleMania, Rock and Austin, of course. However, I'm going to kind of move away from that and answer something else. I'm going to say WrestleMania 31, one of the recent ones. I just think that this WrestleMania, it's pivotal for me because it's really when I got back into wrestling fully fledged sort of thing. And I just thought that this card was actually really good. Triple H and Sting was so good with all the NWO stuff. Overbooked to the nines, but it's a Triple H match. Sting as well. So yeah, that was really good. Main event saw Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins, you know, and Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar was the original match. Obviously, Seth Rollins got involved. Best cash-in ever. Took the WWE title from both men's grips. Even the way the pay-per-view started, the ladder match, the Intercontinental title ladder match that Daniel Bryan won. We saw, you know, rest in peace, Luke Harper was in that match. Dean Ambrose, John Moxley was there. It was just a good pay-per-view, a good WrestleMania from top to bottom. I know there's some other matches I'm just probably not coming to memory right now, but nah, that was a very good WrestleMania. It is one of my favorites. I always go back and watch. So yeah, WrestleMania 17 is probably the correct answer, but for me, deep down, WrestleMania 31 is probably one of my top manias. So yeah, that's going to be my answer, WrestleMania 31. Thanks for having me, Steve, and I look forward to seeing what everyone else has to say.
Fantastic choice there. Big thank you to Mex WrestleManiac UK picking WrestleMania 31, the heist of the century. So you see how it works now. We're going to go through the next few entrants. You won't see my face now for a little while. The next time you see me, I'll be giving you the first updates of the votes and standings. But before I disappear, I'll introduce entrant number 3. Chris is back on YouTube. You may remember it's my wrestling podcast. Of course, he's not involved with that anymore, but he's got a brand new channel for you now, a brand new gaming channel, including wrestling as well. It is Deez Games here on SCW.
Well, I bet you weren't expecting to see me on this video, were you guys? Hello, it's been a long time. My very, very good friend Steve has asked me to come here and tell you all about my favourite WrestleMania pay-per-view of all time. If you've ever spoken to me, I think even my mailman must know what my favourite WrestleMania is. It's WrestleMania 17, the one and only. Not just because I thought it was an awesome pay-per-view, but it was my first ever WrestleMania, watching wrestling as a kid, so it has lots and lots of special memories for me. Also has my favourite WrestleMania match of all time in it, but that's for a separate video, so we'll get onto that later. What an ending with Austin and The Rock, that amazing heel turn. I know it didn't work out very well for Austin, that heel turn. Nobody really accepted it, but it was such a cool moment. We had TLC 2, Undertaker, Triple H, Benoit angle. Everything was fun. There were a few dud matches in there. Obviously, the gimmick battle royale, but that was still fun. China, her title match in there wasn't the best. The triple threat hardcore title match, that was great. So yeah, I know it's sound like a bit of a broken record. So many people are going to say WrestleMania 17. Probably in this video, there's going to be loads of people that say it, but it's a lot of people's favourites for a reason. Top to bottom, just an absolutely phenomenal pay-per-view.
What's up, everybody? So I was asked what would be, in my opinion, the greatest WrestleMania event of all time. This is a very, very difficult question for me, but if I have to just pick one WrestleMania, I'm going to go WrestleMania 24 in Orlando. WrestleMania 24 has some of the most memorable matches, in my personal feeling. You have a great triple threat match between Randy Orton and John Cena and Triple H, which Randy Orton came away with the win, which basically, solidified him as, the guy for the season. Everybody thought it was going to be John Cena or Triple H, and it was Randy. You had Shawn Michaels and Ric Flair's very emotional, very, very good retirement match. I wish that had been Ric Flair's last match. And you have one of the most underrated main events ever with The Undertaker versus Edge. And it's one of the best matches I've ever seen in the main event. So if I had to pick a favorite WrestleMania event of all time that I think is the best, it's at WrestleMania 24.
So, Steve has asked me what my favourite WrestleMania is of all time. And you know what? I've given it some thought, and I'm not going to go with WrestleMania 17 like I'm sure most people will, because it is a great WrestleMania, but I am going to go for WrestleMania 21. WrestleMania goes Hollywood. This card was absolutely stacked. We had John Cena and Batista finally reaching the mountain, getting those championships from JBL and Triple H. We had an absolute barn burner of a match between Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle. Great opener between Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero. We had Randy Orton versus The Undertaker. There were just so many great matches on this card. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, WrestleMania 21 is my favourite WrestleMania of all time. Cheers, Steve.
When HHWShow asked me what is the best WrestleMania of all time, my first instinct was, how can I answer this with something that isn't what everyone else is going to answer it with? Because I've got a feeling everyone's going to answer one way, and I didn't really want to just go down the same path as everyone. I want to be a bit different and a bit unique. But upon thinking about it, there really is no debate when it comes to this topic. I feel like it is WrestleMania 17 as the greatest WrestleMania of all time. I'm sure everyone else in this video will give the full breakdown of this card because, in my opinion, and really the opinion of many, this is pretty much an objective fact. With WrestleMania 17, the main event especially of that show was, the climax of the Attitude Era, and you had as well, TLC 2, and just generally the whole show, everything about it just clicked. Just a fantastic show, the venue, the crowd, the match card itself, the stories involved. WrestleMania 17, the greatest WrestleMania of all time.
We're back again on the SCW channel. When my guy Steve hits me up, I have to join. He's a great guy. He's genuinely one of the nicest human beings in the wrestling community. And that's kind of rare. I just want to take a second here to just talk good about this guy. It's pretty rare to see some genuinely nice human beings in the wrestling community, especially on Twitter. Steve is really one of the nicer guys out there. So, yeah, I had no problem doing this, but let's get to it. what I think is the best WrestleMania of all time, and now this is a bit of a controversial choice. I'm already prepared for a bit of a slight reaction from this. I think WrestleMania 19 is the best WrestleMania top to bottom ever made. There's one fatal flaw in this show, and that's really Triple H versus Booker T. And the match itself wasn't bad. It was the storyline leading up to it that made the match itself look pretty bad. And the fact, that Booker T was kind of a sub-in. It was supposed to be Triple H versus Scott Steiner, but, that wasn't going to work out. Scott Steiner just wasn't able to compete at the level that WWE wanted him to. But nevertheless, I think this is the best WrestleMania ever. You have Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho in the mid-card. One of the greatest matches of all time. Steve Austin's final WrestleMania match, final wrestling match ever, unless he returns at WrestleMania 38. But for now, it's Stone Cold's final wrestling match versus The Rock. Third time they wrestled at WrestleMania. This one was not the main event. The main event, Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar, just phenomenal. Vince McMahon versus Hulk Hogan in a street fight. 25 years in the making, or whatever the tagline was. 15 years in the making, I think it was, actually. It just doesn't get any better than that. Yeah, top to bottom, my favorite WrestleMania. I can go back and watch this WrestleMania anytime. And I think it's also the best. The buy rate doesn't show, the buy rate doesn't hold up against like WrestleMania 28 or 17. But to me, I think it's the best ever. I think it stacks up against any wrestling card, top to bottom.
So there you have it there. That's our first round of entries there of what is the greatest WrestleMania event of all time. Big thank you to the very kind words, by the way, from Kevin there from Bonafide Heat. Really do appreciate it. Thank you for taking part as well to JTE, as well as the Wrestling by Waldridge, Bama Slammer Wrestling Podcast, along with Deez Games also. Let's go and look at the stands then as we go now with the first round. And as we can see there, WrestleMania X7 17 is taking the early lead there with 2 votes though, but with a host of WrestleManias on 1 vote at this stage here. We've got WrestleMania 3, 19, 21, 24 and 31. Still plenty of time now for everything to change now as we go into WrestleMania 8, which actually was my first WrestleMania watching ever, and we've got a very special guest that's going to be taking part in this. She is a writer for SC Scoops as well as WrestleZone. She's involved on Women's Wrestling Talk, and she's got a very own podcast, A Wrestling Gal, which has been available on all audio platforms, but very recently is now available as a YouTube channel as well. It is the one, the only, Ella J, here on SCW.
Hello everybody, Ella J here of A Wrestling Gal podcast, here to talk about the greatest WrestleMania of all time. And while there were 2 options floating about in my mind, one simply for the nostalgia and personal sentimental value with me, also I think I have to go with the latter and talk about the quality pay-per-view as a whole. And so that is why I personally am choosing WrestleMania 17, X7, 2001, whatever you want to call it, is the greatest WrestleMania of all time for the sheer quality and I think the drawing power of the matchup. Obviously, you had The Rock and Stone Cold in the main event. You also had a triple threat TLC tag team match between the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys. You also had Shane McMahon and Mr. McMahon and Undertaker and Triple H. So for me, that was definitely a overall great pay-per-view, great WrestleMania, and really to have 2 worlds collide between The Rock and Stone Cold again is definitely one of the greatest main events ever. And so that for me makes WrestleMania X7 the greatest of all time.
My personal favourite WrestleMania is WrestleMania 12, but I think the greatest WrestleMania is WrestleMania 35. With Kofi Mania, with Seth versus Brock, with the women's triple threat, I just think that's the one.
Hi Steve, so my favourite WrestleMania of all time has to be WrestleMania 18. Hogan versus Rock on it, Flair and Taker and that was good as well, Triple H and Jericho. The card from top to bottom was really fun, a really fun watch. And coming off of WrestleMania 17, 18 was just as big and just as fun to watch. This is probably one of my favourite WrestleManias of all time. Now there is a bunch scattered throughout the time, but I'm saying that this is the one that I go back and watch most often. It is a very fun WrestleMania to watch, and it's something that I really enjoy, especially with like Hogan and Rock. This is Flair and Taker when Flair's just bloodied, and the whole thing, the lead up to this WrestleMania was good as well, and it's that WWF versus WWE, WCW feeling that we get on this one.
Now, the best WrestleMania event of all time, Frank. Who do you got?
Mine was WrestleMania 18, where you had Hogan against The Rock.
Okay, fair enough.
For me, it was WrestleMania 20 in Madison Square Garden. I mean, that was when John Cena won his first title. He won the U.S. title against Big Show. A lot of great matches on that card. I mean, talking about Christian versus Chris Jericho, Undertaker versus Kane, Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle. To me, it was an awesome WrestleMania.
I want to say WrestleMania 30 was probably my all-time great, because the fact that Daniel Bryan had to defeat Triple H to get his shot to the championship. Then he went on to beat Batista and Randy Orton, and knowing the meaning of that match, you know, that match was dedicated to Connor, who had passed away for having cancer. So that meant a lot to me. I also got to see John Cena and Bray Wyatt, and most importantly of all, Brock Lesnar stopping the undefeated streak of The Undertaker. And that's it. Thank you for having us, and thank you for watching the HHW Show podcast.
What's up, Steve? This is Cinco from Another Rose Podcast, hashtag KTR, KTR_podcast on all social media platforms. And I'm going to give you this real quick snippet for you for my favorite WrestleMania of all time. Has to be none other than WrestleMania 28, the end of an era WrestleMania. And the reason I say this, that's because basically that was the end of the wrestling that we grew up on before we transitioned to the new stars of the wrestling business today. That's when we had the Triple H versus Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as special guest referee. We had Y2J, Chris Jericho versus CM Punk for the WWE title. We had Kane versus Randy Orton. We had Big Show going over Cody Rhodes for the Intercontinental title. Also, we had The Rock versus John Cena. I don't think any other WrestleMania tops that WrestleMania for WrestleMania 28. WrestleMania 28, best WrestleMania of all time.
One of my personal favourites as well there. Big thank you there to Cinco from Know the Ropes podcast, as well as the HHWShow, Nonstop Wrestling Chat, Tom Conague, and of course Ella J as well there. A great variety of wrestling YouTubers. Let's look where the standings are at this point. WrestleMania X7 still holds the lead at this point with 3 votes, but catching up in second place and winning that round was WrestleMania X8 with 2 votes now, and we have a host of WrestleManias in third place. WrestleMania 3, 19, 20, 21, 24, 28, 30, 31, and 35. So it's all quite close at this early stage. Anything can happen. A host of WrestleManias have been chosen. Has your favourite been called out yet? We'll have to wait and see as we go into our next round of hosts, starting with someone debuting on the channel for the very first time. She is a part of Women's Wrestling Talk, and she has her own YouTube channel as well, named after her. It's Samira, here on SCW for the very first time.
Hello everybody, Samira here, and what might be my favorite WWE WrestleMania of all time? My favorite WWE WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 31. Why, do you ask? I thought that the card, everything from the pre-show to the last match, killed it. It was so good. We had Seth Rollins cash in, we had Daniel Bryan, there was just so much going on in that card. It was so good, and that was one WrestleMania I wish I could have been in person for. I've never been to a WrestleMania at that point, and I was like, oh, as a teenager at that time watching, I was like, oh, I wish I could have been there, because that card was just a stacked card. It was banger after banger after banger. So who wouldn't want to be there? Who wouldn't? And we also had Sting and the NWO, like, hello, why not?
Hey Steve, James here from This Week in Metropolis. Great work as always, love the show mate, and what you do is incredible. But more importantly, what is my favourite WrestleMania? Well, the one that sticks out in my mind, other than the one that we watched together when I came over to stay with you, was WrestleMania 30. That's right. It had so much about it. I mean, I'm sure there's others that were up there on the levels of matches and so forth, but I mean, the shocks that we had from that WrestleMania with Brock Lesnar, finally, The Undertaker was defeated by him, and also the whole Yes movement. I mean, that was the one where Daniel Bryan beat Triple H early on in the night to end up winning the title in the main event against Randy Orton and Batista. The Yes movement was in full swing. What an event that was. There was other matches as well that were really good on the card. But yeah, that would have to be my pick. WrestleMania 30.
Hello, once again, professional wrestling fans and friends. It is I, the Simple Man, and my name is Noah Foster, giving you a simple take and stand on one of my favorite WrestleManias of all time. For me, WrestleMania 19 was always a standout. Biggest story going in, of course, could The Rock finally overcome Stone Cold after failing against him in 2 previous occasions? You had collegiate athletes in our main event, where one of the best of all time, to this day still, I stand by it, Kurt Angle. He took on the up-and-coming Brock Lesnar, who basically eventually broke out to be the next big thing. At the time, the bitter blood feud it looked like decades to make between Hulk Hogan and Vince. It was very compelling storytelling, and as an advocate of cruiserweight wrestling and women's professional wrestling, it definitely hit me very special when Rey Mysterio was contending for the title against Matt Hardy, 2 of some of my all-time favorites. And people know I'm a fan of the Hardy Boys, but also always been a fan of Tara, whatever you want to call her, or Ness. Sorry, I'm tired. But Trish Stratus, I always got to get my Stratus faction. Come on now. And of course, Trish Stratus overcame 2 of the all-time greats in Victoria and Jazz. Some great tag team action, and then a battle of egos, in-ring specialist, charisma galore, Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho. Personally, when I think about Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho, Rock, Stone Cold, Brock Lesnar, and Kurt Angle, those are 3 matches I really rank as some of my favorite WrestleMania matches of all time too. So overall, this was a great event, and based on what I heard, it was also one of the more prolific WrestleManias in history too. Shout out to American Badass Undertaker too, coming out with a biscuit, rolling. But yeah, that's just some simple thoughts when it comes to one of my all-time favorite WWE WrestleManias as a fan since 1992. In my opinion, top to bottom, one of the greatest of all time for me, despite the controversy with the whole Triple H and Booker T thing. It, for me, is WrestleMania 19. So there you go. Enjoy the rest of the video, and I'll see you around.
Hey, this This is Liz.
This is Jerry.
And we are from the
WrestleSlam
WrestleSlam Podcast. And our favourite, I suppose, the best WrestleMania for WWE of all time has got to be WrestleMania 31! Why? Well, we were there, firstly. Secondly, it was our first trip to the States. And thirdly, it was the scene for the heist of the century, where Seth Rollins cashed in and walked out as the champ.
I said I'd randomly show up at some point. For me, the greatest WrestleMania of all time comes down to one of two shows. I'm a big fan of WrestleMania 19. It's one of the most complete WrestleManias of all time. But there's just a couple of things that take it away from the number one spot for me. So without further ado, the most complete, the most perfectly timed and structured WrestleMania of all time has to be WrestleMania X7. It just feels like it flies by. 3 hours and 45 minutes, you feel like you're there for 2 hours. You've got components like TLC 2, you've got great matches like Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, William Regal, the hardcore triple threat match, you've got Triple H, Undertaker, and of course you've got that main event of Steve Austin versus The Rock. And of course Vince McMahon comes out, and of course you see Austin and Vince aligned together. And of course Vince had lost earlier in the evening to the Street Fight as well, to Shane McMahon. So yeah, for me, top to bottom, this is the most complete WrestleMania, the greatest WrestleMania of all time. It's very rare that you can get a near on perfect show in wrestling terms, and this for me just ticks all the boxes. You even look with the commentary duo of Jim Ross and Paul Heyman, criminally underrated. So yeah, that's going to take my vote for the best WrestleMania of all time. So big thank yous there to the WrestleSlam Podcast. For us, we had Noah Foster, of course, got his own YouTube channel, part of No DQ. We've had This Week in Metropolis, the best man of my wedding, James, there for you. And of course, it's Samira, also a great host of content creators. But let's see what it's done to the standings. WrestleMania X7 just about holding on to the top spot there, sharing it now with WrestleMania 31 with 4 votes each. We've then got WrestleMania X8, 19 and 30, both sharing 2 votes each. And then we've got a host of WrestleManias on 1 vote, WrestleMania 3, 20, 21, 24, 28 and 35. So it is neck and neck as we go into our next selection of wrestling YouTubers, and starting off with a very talented and creative bunch of lads. Got some great unique series they've got on YouTube with like Whose Song Is It? Wrestling's House. They've even got their own podcast series discussing all things professional wrestling. It is of course the one, the only Wrestling's here on SCW.
Yo, what it do, people? It's your boy Delboy here from Wrestling's Podcast. Big up Steve, SCW. And we've been tasked today to talk about our favourite WrestleManias of all time. And personally, I feel like there's only one answer, WrestleMania 17. Man, come on. There's so much to it. Let's talk about the commentary. Jim Ross, Paul Heyman. Together, I feel like they're an underrated duo. I don't think a lot of people speak about them. I feel like every match on this card was phenomenal. I don't feel like there was any fillers, not like as of recent times where we have matches like that. But this time around, you know, there's matches from Shane versus Vince, great. Chris versus Kurt Angle, great. The bloody triple TLC match, the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, the Hardy Boys, absolute barn burner. We even had the nostalgic Battle Royal. Not gonna lie, I'm not really the biggest fan. I'm a nostalgia police, but that alone, I feel like it done its job and it was amazing. And it goes without saying, Rock and Austin. Rock and freaking Austin. It goes without saying, man. WrestleMania 17, you already know. Delboy, Wrestling's Podcast by the man for the man them. Big shout out to SCW. Wow.
Yo, what's going on? Zanafi from the Wrestling's Podcast. Big up SCW. In terms of greatest WrestleMania event of all time, I've got 2. I've got WrestleMania 20 and WrestleMania 17. Both really encapsulate my childhood, and you know, there's a lot of nostalgia tax added onto it. But you know, if I was gonna pick one one that I can watch again and again, and one that means so much to me is WrestleMania 20, simply because it's the first, there's always like a transition period in it, same as WrestleMania 17, but this one was more of a transition period. We had like people like stars like John Cena making a name for himself. We had Undertaker return from the dead. We also had like, the whole tag team match. I think it was like a 3-way or like 4-way tag team match, kind of sick. Also had the triple threat match as well, which is one of the greatest matches I've seen in my life. But yeah, if I had to give it that, it has to be WrestleMania 20, man, one of the best events I've seen. But yeah, obviously Stone Cold and The Rock is also there, but yeah, WrestleMania 20.
All right, Steve, how you doing today? Thank you very much for giving us a chance to join your show and give our opinion on the greatest WrestleMania of all time.
Oh my God! How many times do I have to do this for this guy? Gee, man.
Oh my word! What a choice this is to make. So you've got once again PC Hunter and NWO Machine here trying to give our opinions, but it's like picking your favorite child, is it not?
That's easy. I don't have any.
You got some somewhere, my friend.
Every Father's Day, I check the mailbox. So far, I've moved just enough.
All right, I'll lead things off. I'll go with, for me, I'm going to pick, this might not make sense, but it does to me. I'm going to pick WrestleMania 1 because it's the one that started it all. And if it didn't actually succeed, I don't know if you'd have the WWE that you have today. So it may not have been the most stacked card. It may not have been the classic matches, but it had just enough pizzazz. It had just enough storyline to get everybody involved. I mean, you had the celebrities, you had New York, you had Madison Square Garden, you just had the buzz, you had Hogan, Piper, T, Orndorff. That's all you need. That's all you need. So the granddaddy of them all, WrestleMania 1, I'm going to pick as the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Machine.
It's hard to argue because that really started the castle, right? I mean, to become king of the castle, that had to succeed. For me, again, I know last time we talked about Sergeant Slaughter and Hogan and WrestleMania 7, it was in a wartime. The people needed something, they needed the hero, and I think a lot of people tuned in because they wanted that hero. So I think that particular WrestleMania drew people in for the conflict that was going on in the world. Was it the greatest? I'm not going to say that. To me, I still go with number 3. I think back to no one's ever seen that many people at one event. So you had to tune in to see this extravaganza. And then, of course, well, we all know the slam heard around the world, right? And if you're a true wrestling person, you know that wasn't the first time Andre had ever been slammed, and not by Hogan or not by anybody. He was slammed a few times during his career before then, but that was the pinnacle of pushing Hogan through the roof. And we've had our conversation on our own podcast. What if that slam never happened? And what if Hogan never happened? Well, I don't think we'd have what we had today. So to me, number 3 was it. You had the world watching your stage.
I agree. That was my number 2. That was my alternate if I didn't go with 1, but hey, you can't go wrong with either. They're both epic.
That's it. Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Machine, for that. And thank you once again, Steve, for letting us participate in this great episode. And best of luck with all your future shows. And thank you for having us. Take care.
How's it going, everybody? Warren here from the Discus Lariat Collective. Thanks again, Steve, for having me on the channel. And in terms of the greatest WrestleMania of all time, I was debating WrestleMania 19. I really like that, and WrestleMania 20 as well was a really good one for me personally. But it's hard to go against WrestleMania 17. Just like the roster at the time, my God, like the amount of talent on the card, the crowd was hot, the scheduling or the way the card was laid out was just perfect, I think. And then like the matches themselves, like you have easily 3, I'd say. 5-star matches. You have Benoit and Angle, which is a clinic. You had the TLC match for the Tag Team Championships. That's iconic. Still to this day, it's iconic. Probably one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. And then Austin versus Rock again, which it's two icons. Do you know what I mean? You can't get much bigger than that. So two icons of the sport, and then the crazy kind of finish to it with Austin shaking Vince's hand and like a sign of the end of the Attitude Era, and Jim Ross, of course, losing his mind on the desk. It's just an amazing show, top to bottom, and I think that's the greatest WrestleMania of all time.
I say my favorite WrestleMania probably is WrestleMania 21. It gets overlooked a little bit, but it's a changing of the guards from new to old. So I gotta go with that. Plus HBK versus Kurt, Ray versus Eddie. You can't go. So those two, kind of stole the night, even though HBK and Eddie Guerrero never had a match. So I just want to give a shout out to SC Dub. You can find me on the GetCho Podcast on Twitter, GetCho Podcast on Instagram. Shout out to everybody here, y'all. If you see somebody with an NWO shirt.
Yes, it's me, it's NXSteve back again on the STW channel. This time, Steve, you've put out another one of these seriously difficult to answer questions. You want to know my greatest mania of all time. I whittled it down to 2 in the end. The honorable mention will go to WrestleMania 35. The unexpected fact that we would get Seth Rollins beating Brock, Kofi beating Daniel Bryan, and Becky winning the main event, and 3 faces picking up titles on WrestleMania was unexpected. I'm pretty sure a lot of people thought we would only get 2 out of 3 of those things, but no, we got 3, and it was a great fan service with that one. But for me, personally, it's WrestleMania 30. It's Daniel Bryan. It's the biggest babyface run, naturally occurring babyface run in a long time, probably since Stone Cold for me with Daniel Bryan. The fact that he had to open the show with Triple H to qualify for that main event, the whole story that year, it was just one of the best stories that WWE have done in a long time. So for me, WrestleMania 30. Thanks for having me once again, Steve. I'll speak to you soon, fella.
Big thanks to everyone involved there. NXSteve, we had the Discus Lariat Collective, GetCho Podcast there for us, Wrestling with the Truth, and Wrestling's there. A great, talented bunch of content creators there, and a host of votes as well. So, without further ado, let's see those standings. So now, as we can see, WrestleMania 87 has taken the lead once again, now having 6 votes. In second place, still now with 4 votes, it's WrestleMania 31. In third place, creeping above the rest now, it's WrestleMania 30 with 3 votes. And in fourth place, we have a host of WrestleManias on 2 votes. And, well, because I can't be bothered to count, in fifth place, we will have another more host of WrestleManias sitting on 1 vote. So there's still time for it all to change. What's going to happen as we get our next wrestling YouTubers in the hot seat to give their votes, starting with Katie Rasslin. That's right, a show that can't be missed on a weekly basis on her YouTube channel. That's right, it is none other than ShElite Showcase.
Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Katie from the ShElite Showcase. I was asked my favorite WrestleMania of all time. Now, I'm going to be biased because I was there and I was a young kid. It was my first big pay-per-view, the only time I've been to a WrestleMania. I'm going to go with WrestleMania 23, and that happened in Detroit, Michigan. Not only did I get to see Vince gets shaved, which was like a weird thing I wasn't really expecting to see. I got to see Batista and Undertaker for the World Heavyweight Championship, and that match was awesome, and that was the first time I got to see Undertaker wrestle, and I'm happy I did during his tenure. But I also got to see John Cena take on Mr. WrestleMania himself in the main event, Shawn Michaels, for the WWE Championship. And not only was the match incredible, I'm a huge John Cena fan, and I really was as a kid, but John Cena drove the car through the glass, and that is one of the most memorable John Cena WrestleMania entrances, so I'm happy I got to see that. So yeah, personal bias 100% there, but I'm gonna go with WrestleMania 23 is my favorite WrestleMania of all time.
The greatest WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 17. The variety and the quality of that variety is just unmatched, no matter what kind of wrestling fan you are. If you wanted technical wrestling, you got Chris Jericho versus William Regal. You also got Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit. If you want car crash wrestling, well, you got the TLC match, but you also have that very underrated hardcore title triple threat match. If you want women's wrestling, all right, you got Ivory versus China, which was a squash match, but China was red hot at the time, and it was a great moment. If you're into the soap opera type of stuff, the storyline heavy stuff, you got Vince McMahon versus Shane McMahon. You have the immense star power. Matches like Triple H versus Undertaker. But you also have one of the best builds to a WrestleMania main event of all time in The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Great match with two of the biggest stars of all time. So WrestleMania 17 from top to bottom is by far the best in my opinion.
It's WrestleMania season again, and you know what? I can't walk down the streets of Hollywood without people asking me stupid questions like, Zach, do you think Cody's going to show up at WrestleMania? Or Zach, do you think Stone Cold is going to have a match at WrestleMania? Or Zach, do you realize you just ran over a homeless person 2 blocks ago? But Steve, thank you for asking me a real good question. What do I think is the greatest WrestleMania of all time? And that's easy. It's WrestleMania 36. Why? Because it was the one without you smart Mark fans. The beauty of WrestleMania 36, there were no idiots chanting, "This is awesome," 30 seconds into a match for absolutely no reason. For once, the wrestlers could perform without the stench of BO and Cheetos. This was the greatest WrestleMania of all time because it deprived so many fans of WrestleMania moments. And you know what? We don't need to bring back legends at all at WrestleMania ever again. We just need to bring back COVID. Because COVID is the one.
Hello everyone, Joey Carney here from the Angle Podcast, and a huge shout out to HHWShow for inviting me back onto his show to discuss what I believe is the greatest WrestleMania of all time. And without a shadow of a doubt, I have to choose WrestleMania 17. I mean, can you pick a better event? Some of the matches on that card were some of the greatest matches of all time, period. We had Stone Cold, The Rock, TLC, Undertaker, Ric Flair, so many names and more. WrestleMania 17 has to be, without, like I said, a shadow of a doubt, my favorite and the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Again, shout out to Steve, SCW, a great channel, always love the content, and I'm looking forward to being a part of many, many more of these great shows.
Thank you so much, Steve, for letting me be a part of this video. What is the greatest WrestleMania of all time? I was struggling. I had the choice of 2. Could have gone with WrestleMania 7, but then again, maybe a lot of people on this show will pick it. So I've decided Scott Ratcher Wrestling. Let's go with Hollywood. That's right, I'm actually picking WrestleMania 21 as the greatest WrestleMania of all time, in this guy's opinion. You had Eddie Ray open the show, first ever Money in the Bank ladder match, probably the first really good Undertaker street match against Randy Orton, instant classic between Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle, and the crowning of two stars, John Cena and Batista. And I loved all the Hollywood stuff before it. So WrestleMania 21 is in my opinion, the greatest WrestleMania of all time.
Great selection there from Scott, Retro Wrestling. Of course, WrestleMania will be going back to Hollywood next year, won't it? Big thank you to him, as well as West Coast Podcast with their entertaining take there from Zach's. We've got the Angle Podcast, Apron Bump, and of course, ShElite Showcase. So let's see what it does to the standings. And WrestleMania X7 continues to be at the number one. 2 more votes there, giving it 8 in total, which is now double second place. WrestleMania 31 on 4 votes. Will a comeback be on? In joint third place, we've got WrestleMania's 21 and 30. And I'm going to still say fourth place going forward now. We have a host of WrestleManias there with 2 votes, as well as a host more with 1 vote in 5th place. So 27 down, which means we've got 11 WrestleManias to go, which means we've got 11 YouTube channels to go. So a host of votes still to come in, which means it's still time for everything to change. I'm going to start things off then with a moderator on Tom Conahue's YouTube channel as well. He's got his own creative content going on Love Wrestling. One of the good guys in the wrestling community with great takes as always. It is the one, the only Ed Fries.
Hello, I'm Ed Fries from Love Wrestling's NXT, and I just wanted to say thank you again to Steve for having me on. And when I think of the best WrestleMania card as a whole, there's only a few that come to mind, but for me, nothing beats WrestleMania 19. We start with Matt Hardy versus Rey Mysterio for the Cruiserweight Championship. You have the triple threat tag match between Team Angle, Chris Benoit and Rhino, and Los Guerreros. I mean, just absolute synergy in that match. You then move on to Chris Jericho versus Shawn Michaels. How can you get better than that? Oh, Triple H and Booker T. While the storyline for that match wasn't great, and the finish wasn't the most ideal, great match between 2 incredible people. Hulk Hogan defeating Mr. McMahon in that street fight. While not the most technically gifted match in the world, incredibly entertaining. Stone Cold Steve Austin losing to The Rock. And then, if all of that wasn't enough, your main event, Brock Lesnar becoming the world champion after he defeats Kurt Angle in the match where he almost breaks his own neck against the man who broke his neck. I mean, with that shooting star press, it's hard to think that there's anything better than WrestleMania 19.
When you think of WrestleMania, it's the biggest wrestling event of the year. And so it's so many different moments and matches over the years that made this a bit harder to pinpoint. When I think of WrestleMania 33, I think about the Hardy Boys' return to WWE, and I'm probably one of their biggest fans. I'm popped super hard for that, or again, how I felt about WrestleMania 37 with Bianca and Sasha main eventing. And so there's always those moments that makes certain WrestleMania special. But as far as if I'm thinking about an overall WrestleMania that I really enjoyed, I want to say WrestleMania 17 because you kind of had a little bit of everything. You had Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit, you had Rock and Stone Cold, you had TLC 2, you had Chyna and Ivory, you even had Shane versus Vince in some like street fight like family thing. And so no matter where you kind of stood on what kind of wrestling you liked, you had a little bit of everything on that WrestleMania. And so I'm going with WrestleMania 17 as my favorite WrestleMania of all time.
Yes, people, it's GG at GG OnWrestling on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and look for me wherever you get your podcast from. More importantly, make sure you're subscribed to SHELite. WrestleMania season is here, and we're talking the greatest WrestleManias of all time. And I have a very controversial one for mine that I believe is the greatest WrestleMania ever. It's WrestleMania 9. And I can hear the boos already. I know it's revered as one of the worst WrestleManias of all time, but to me, it's just so nostalgic. It's one that I watched constantly as a child, and it just hits me right in the nostalgia feels. The talent on this show, you know, proper 90s roster. You know, you've got the Steiners, the Head Shrinkers, Lex Luger, Razor Ramon, Doink. You know, it just screams 90s WWF. What I find most interesting is, you know, you watch it as a kid, you're a Hulkamaniac, you're having a great time, you get to see Hulk Hogan twice on the show, you're loving it, and then you watch it as an adult and you realise how much of a politician Hulk Hogan was and how much he made it all about him. But yeah, that's my favourite, WrestleMania 9. Thanks for having me, Steve. Respect yourself, don't neglect yourself. Peace.
Greatest WrestleMania of all time to me has to be WrestleMania 17. If you look at this event, still to this day, from top to bottom, the card was absolutely stacked with tremendous matchups. Obviously, the main event being The Rock Austin 2 live in the Houston Astrodome. Massive pop, massive reaction, and able to follow up after the match that stole the show. First ever triple tag team ladder match, Hardys, Dudleys, Edge, and Christian. So many great stuff. So much fun when you had Big Show, Kane, Raven in that hardcore match, driving the little car, breaking through glass, all that stuff. It was a really fun event, and you can't ask for much more from WWF here in terms of the greatest WrestleMania of all time. This has to be from top to bottom the best. The best matches, the best card during the best time period in professional wrestling.
Hello guys, it's 2K here. You won't know that channel, but you may know me from the old Dan Williams videos. Right, greatest WrestleMania of all time. For me, I'm going for the one that most people think is the worst WrestleMania of all time. But in my eyes, it's one of the best. WrestleMania 32, I bet no one's picked that. I bet it was the worst. That was my first year I got into it at Mania 31, so that was my first year as a fan, watching from a Mania to a Mania. And 13-year-old me was so engrossed that even I was cheering for babyface Roman Reigns. And you know, AJ Styles' WrestleMania debut, that ladder match, awesome. Shane McMahon jumping off top of Hell in a Cell. You know, Legends coming back to beat up the League of Nations. It was vibes. It was just good vibes. You know, the arena was nice, set was nice. So yeah, Mania 32.
Do you know what? I think Dan's got a point there. It's quite a good WrestleMania looking back there and going through some of those images we saw at the start of it as well. WrestleMania 32, perhaps been one of the more underrated WrestleManias. But big thank you to Dan, as always. They're looking forward to the launch of his new channel, as well as other regulars as well. Rated R For Rasslin. We've had GG on Wrestling. We've had In Cat We Trust. And of course, we've had Ed Fries from Love Wrestling. So let's see now what it has done to the scoreboard. WrestleMania X7 now starting to run away with it with 10 votes in first place, and still in second place, not catching up at the moment. It is WrestleMania 31. Will there be a dramatic finale? We've got a host of names still to come. We then have in third place a host of WrestleManias 19, 21 and 30, and then we've got WrestleMania 3, X8 and 20 in what I'm now going to call fourth place with 2 votes each. And what I'm going to call fifth place, we've got WrestleManias 1, 9, 23, 24, 28, 32, 35 and 36. So let's get into the final round of wrestling YouTubers then. We've got some multiple guests coming in as well, so things can still change. Let's see what's going to happen. We're going to start things off then with a great podcast, always very supportive of this channel, have great debates on wrestling, UFC and much more. It is none other than Circle of Debate. here on SCW.
This is the host of Devious One Ivan C here from Circle Debate Podcast. I want to go ahead and thank Steve for the opportunity to go ahead and give my greatest WrestleMania of all time, and that is WrestleMania 17, as we had 12 incredible matches, and of course a gimmick battle royal, of course. But the biggest one was the show stealer of this card was the TLC between the Hardy Boys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian. What a phenomenal match. And this is when we saw Edge spearing Jeff Hardy from the top of the ladder while he was hanging on the ladder. And of course, the biggest unexpected that nobody expected, Stone Cold Steve Austin turning heel and joining with Vince McMahon as he defeated The Rock to regain the WWF Championship. And of course, he had Triple H versus The Undertaker, another incredible match there. So WrestleMania 17, stat card, and one of my greatest WrestleManias of all time.
What's going on, guys? This is the kid DC Wrestling, back at it again with another video, man. Huge thanks to SCW, man, for allowing me to come on here. And in my opinion, guys, because we're all talking about what's the greatest WrestleMania pay-per-view event of all time, it's without a shadow of a doubt, in my opinion, WrestleMania X7, April 1st, 2001. A lot of matches, man, on this show took place to make this show just a legendary pay-per-view event. He had a great technical bout with Kurt Angle and Benoit, Shane, Mr. McMahon, their little storyline, father versus son. You had the TLC match with Edge, Christian, the Dudley Boys, and the Hardy Boys, Triple H and Undertaker, and then, of course, in the main event, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Oh, hell yeah. And the Brahma Bull, The Rock, taking on each other for the WWF Championship. And, of course, the big shocker, man, Stone Cold Steve Austin aligning himself with the devil himself, Mr. McMahon. This, in my opinion, is the greatest WrestleMania of all time, man. Thank you so much again.
All right, the Bump Boys officially agree. WrestleMania 24, the best WrestleMania. Danny, you get, I think all of us agree, you get Taker versus Edge. You get Shawn versus Ric Flair. You get the Cena, H, and Randy for the WWE title. You get Chavo versus Kane. Like, what else could you need, Danny?
Dude, the match from top to bottom. Kept you on the edge of your seat every match.
Aesthetic, beautiful. You see Edge coming out making his promo, and you see the pyro go off, and you see Taker come out. That's the most visually thing ever. And then, thank you, I'm sorry, I love you.
Yep.
You can't beat that.
Yep, great match.
So WrestleMania 24.
Yep, definitely best one.
Hello, my name is Dan from the Sweet Chin Mag podcast, and I have been asked by Steve to select what I believe is the best WrestleMania of all time. And my pick for the best WrestleMania of all time is WrestleMania X7, aka WrestleMania 17. You really have everything that you want on this show. Really, from back to front, there is quality all over the place, and yes, there is the occasional odd match. We don't forget the gimmick battle royal. But honestly, Raven versus Kane versus Big Show for your hardcore freaks like me. All the way to the heights of Rock versus Austin, with some real sleeper hits in there, like Eddie Guerrero versus Test. And of course, not forgetting the absolute legacy left behind by the TLC match. There is not enough I can do in this world to tell you to go and watch this show. It is so worth your time, and is now the standard against which all other WrestleManias are measured.
far as great WrestleMania of all time, I would have to say WrestleMania 17. You know, cause the match at WrestleMania spectacular, it was everything great about it, and I just love it so much. And not much negativity about it, man. Like, if you haven't seen it, WrestleMania 17, y'all, just watch it, start to finish. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's amazing. Main event, a lot of people had mixed vibes about it, but it was great mixed vibe, not a bad mixed vibe, but the great mixed vibes about the main event. You know what I'm saying? About the outcome, not the match, the outcome. And I'm telling y'all, you check that out, man. WrestleMania 17, definitely my favorite WrestleMania of all time.
So, greatest WrestleMania of all time.
Yeah. Now, this is a tough one, and we've managed to talk about it and actually agree on something here, Carl. We agree. WrestleMania 17. Now, highlights for me. Jericho, Regal, criminally underrated. Great opener to the show. And naturally, Rock versus Austin. The second time. Fantastic trilogy of matches between the two, but a fantastic main event as well. So those are the two particular highlights for 17 for me, but overall I think brilliant pay-per-view.
Absolutely. Can't forget the gimmick battle royal, me being an old school fan, that was
Of course.
a nice little slice of nostalgia for me. And obviously TLC as well, another match which just absolute classic. So yeah, WrestleMania 17, greatest of all time.
Indeed.
Wow. Talk about a dominant finale for you there. Big thank you to everyone involved. The A to the K Wrestling Show. We had Showstopper TV. We had DC Wrestling, Sweet Chin Wag Podcast, along with the Bump Boys and Circle of Debate for you there, all giving their takes on what is the greatest WrestleMania of all time. And of course, in the end, there is no debate on what is the greatest WrestleMania event of all time. It is none other than WrestleMania X7 at the end here, picking up 16 votes. And I've got to say, it just shows from top to bottom. I voted for it as well. I think this show is absolute perfection, and I do recommend, if you're going to go and check out one WrestleMania before WrestleMania this year, just to get yourselves in the mood, you can never go wrong with WrestleMania X7. But there's a host of great WrestleManias as well. Let's see how the rest of the leaderboard did finish. In second place was WrestleMania 31 with 4 votes. In third place were WrestleManias at 19, 21, 24, and 30 with 3 votes apiece. In what will be now fourth place, WrestleManias at 3, X8, of course, that's WrestleMania 18, and WrestleMania 20 with 2 votes. And then in 5th place, we have WrestleManias 1, 9, 23, 28, 32, 35, and 36. So now, that's what we think. We turn our attention to you. What do you think is the greatest WrestleMania event of all time? Have we got it right? Let us know right now in the comment section below. I look forward to interacting with you. If you've enjoyed this video, then please like it as well. Share it with a friend. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications bell. Each and every time a video is released, and more great videos are on the way as we go towards WrestleMania 38, including what is the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. A host of these YouTubers will be back giving their answers to that, and I can promise you it's going to be a closer call than what this one was in the end. Big thank you to everyone that was involved on this video. Honestly, taking the time out to record these clips to send them in to me, this could not have been done without you, so thank you so much to everybody. The links to every channel is in the description below, so I do encourage you to go to the description of this video after it is finished, click on every link to every channel, please subscribe to them, go and watch a video, give them a like, show them some love. But that's all from me anyway. Thank you so much everyone watching. Check out these videos on the side of the screen. In the meantime, take care, enjoy WrestleMania 38, and of course, the predictions will be coming on this channel in the next week as well, so plenty to keep an eye out for. All the best, thank you for watching, have yourselves a great day. You've been watching SCW here on YouTube. See you soon.